Chapter 111, 6th Year, Separation. Remus woke up the next morning with a hangover and an enormous sense of relief. He'd had to be drunk to do it, but it was done. No more jealousy, no more worrying, no more anxious questioning. The key now, he decided, was maintaining a distance and building barriers. By the time he had finished his shower on the morning after his 17th birthday, Remus had a plan of action. He would close the door on whatever his relationship with Sirius had been. It was fine to look upon Christmas as a fond memory, or to feel a little bit lonelier, a little less whole, but this was entirely necessary, both for his health and his sanity. Sirius was not the whole world, as much as he might seem it sometimes. Remus had demonstrated this almost immediately. Upon exiting the bathroom, he bumped into James, who looked as though he hadn't touched a drop of liquor the night before, despite having had just as much as everyone else. The infuriating Potter good fortune apparently applied to hangovers too. "Morning, Mooney," he grinned, rosy-cheeked in his Quidditch robes. Today was not a practice day, but why would that stop James? He raised his broom. "Fancy a spin round the pitch?" This was an old joke, he always asked, and Remus always pulled a face. Remus glanced at the two made beds, and the two with the curtains still closed, where, presumably, Peter and Sirius were still fast asleep. "Yeah," Remus said. "Go on then." "What?" James stopped in his tracks. Remus nodded casually. "I'll go with you. I ought to get better at flying. Might be useful when we finish school. I've got your old broom somewhere. Let me dig it out." Credit to James. After his initial surprise, he was all for the idea, and even held his tongue when he saw the state of Remus's dusty, neglected broomstick. He simply offered to polish it, then led Remus down to the Quidditch pitch, jabbering about simple basic exercises to get your confidence up. And it wasn't awful. James was a very patient teacher, and Remus felt in safe hands. The bespectacled boy didn't even laugh after the third time he fell off. Afterwards, Remus felt he understood James a little better. It was a very wholesome feeling, walking back to breakfast, hungry and aching and full of energy. This first experiment had gone so well, in fact, that Remus decided he would say yes to anything his friends asked of him from now on. In this way, he would keep himself busy until Sirius went back to being whatever he'd been before. At breakfast, they were greeted by a row of red-eyed, sickly-faced Gryffindors, all leaning sleepily on their elbows. Mary and Marlene sitting back to back, propping each other up. "Christ!" Mary squinted at James and Remus. "You've not been exercising? Bloody lunatics!" "You went, Mooney." Sirius looked up, wincing and rubbing his apparently sore neck. Remus just gave him a small shrug, then looked away. Sirius didn't try to talk to him again. They were halfway through the meal, Remus, as usual, eating half his body weight in fried bread, eggs, baked beans and bacon, everyone else picking at their own plate, with faintly nauseous expressions, or else nursing a large mug of black coffee. When Lily straightened up, eyes wide suddenly, as if electrified. "Oh shit!" she said, then kicked James under the table. "Potter!" she hissed. "We never gave Remus his present!" James smirked at her, and Remus raised an eyebrow. "You and James got me a present? Together?" "We all did," James laughed. "And there's no need to beat me up, Evans. I've got it right here." He withdrew a brown leather box from his robes. It was about the size of his hand, smooth and expensive looking, with a gold embossed border. It looked like the sort of thing girls kept their pricier jewellery in. "You're..." Remus accepted the box, curiously. "I hope you didn't spend too much. You know I can't..." "Oh, shut your face, Mooney," Peter yawned, prodding his porridge, dazed. "We had a whip round for you. Almost everyone in Gryffindor wanted to put in." "Not just Gryffindor either," Marlene grinned. "Nearly everyone we asked. Even some teachers. Remus was just looking down at the box now, because he knew he had probably gone red. Some hot, sickly bubble of emotion was burning in his throat, so he swallowed hard, which didn't help. "Open it, Remus," he heard Lily's voice. He pried it apart, and the box sprang open in a pleasantly neat motion. The interior was midnight blue velvet, and nestled among the folds was the most beautiful piece of treasure Remus had ever seen. It was a golden pocket watch on a long fine chain, polished to a high shine so that it was practically glowing. The case was decorated with intricate vine-like swirls and patterns surrounding a shield at the centre, which had been engraved in elaborate script with his initials, RJL. He snapped it open with the lightest touch, and saw inside that the clock face was mother of pearl, and shimmered gorgeously beneath the golden hands which ticked away reassuringly. The other half seemed to contain a compass. "I didn't think they worked at Hogwarts," he murmured. "It's special," Mary said eagerly. "It doesn't point north, or wherever normal ones do. If you say the name of someone you love, it points you in their direction." "Try it out, Moony," James encouraged. Remus looked up at his friends nervously, then quickly raised the watch to his mouth and whispered, "Lily Evans." At once, the needle spun into place, pointing directly across the table. Lily grinned bashfully. James kicked him under the table. "Bloody ladies, man!" "You're all amazing," Remus said, hoping he didn't sound too choked up. "Bloody amazing." For the first week, Remus's new regime seemed pretty effective. It certainly kept him busy. He said yes to everything, happily dropping whatever he was doing at the minute's notice to help a younger student with their homework, or call a group study session when the Care of Magical Creatures Newt class panicked over sphinxes. He accompanied Lily on patrols, he discussed literature with Chris, taught Quidditch tactics with Marlene, and played endless games of chess with Peter, and lost every time. He was the angel of Gryffindor Tower. But Sirius was not the only thing Remus was ignoring. The old shoebox Dumbledore had given him sat underneath his bed still, gathering dust and unopened, as it probably had been for many years, perhaps on some shelf in Matron's office. Why was it a shoebox? Remus wondered, as he tossed and turned in his bed every night. Something so mundane, so everyday. It made whatever was inside seem all the more terrifying. Trust Matron to be so heartlessly practical. It wasn't even from a good shoe shop, like Clark's or Johnson's. It was an economy brand, like everything else he'd ever received at St. Edmund's. The box might have contained any number of things, and it wasn't that Remus wasn't curious. It wasn't as if he didn't try to imagine what was in there. Deeds to a house he could go and live in. That would be pretty brilliant. Maybe some old money. Photographs. A letter from his father. An explanation. It might contain answers to questions he hadn't even known to ask. But he didn't open it. He knew that once he opened the box, all of the mystery would disappear, and he would be left with something disappointing. Because there could be nothing inside that could truly satisfy him. So, keeping busy helped, making sure he exhausted himself each day so that he fell straight to sleep each night, even when the other boys stayed up chatting, plotting pranks. But Sirius himself helped, too. By some incredible twist of fate, he appeared to be giving Remus space. If Sirius remembered Remus's harsh words from the night of the party, then he didn't mention it. But he didn't try to get him alone, or treat him with any kind of resentment or disdain. Remus surmised that Sirius had either 1. Been too drunk to take anything in, or 2. Taken Remus at his word and chosen to back away quietly. For Remus, with exams on the horizon, option 2 was by far the most preferable, so he decided to believe it. Their separation was so smooth and so complete that soon even Remus had a hard time believing they'd ever been close at all. Surely, to everyone else, it must seem that nothing had changed at all. Sirius was still Sirius, outgoing, girl-loving, cheeky, rebellious, devastating. And Remus was just Remus, quiet, private, studious, a long-suffering secondary marauder. As March drew to a close, the birthday party now weeks behind them, there was only one moment when the situation very nearly came to head, but was quickly deflated, with help from an unexpected quarter. It was late one Friday afternoon, and Remus was hosting an introductory duelling workshop. Christopher was there. Christopher was never far away these days, but most of the class were beginners, and much younger. They were just grasping some basic disarming and diversionary spells, when the door to the charms classroom opened, but no one walked in. Everyone turned to look, and muttered, "Peeves," before returning to their attack stances. Remus knew better. He followed the scent about the room, and watched the open door of Flitwick's office move very only slightly, as if someone had brushed the handle on their way inside. Flitwick trusted Remus, and left his office open in case they needed any equipment from inside. He kept a number of large mattresses, which were good for duelling, as well as an emergency healing kit in there. Remus cleared his throat. "That's good. Keep practicing. Remember to enunciate nice and loudly for me. I'll be right back." He slipped around the edges of the room as he said this, then stepped inside the office. "Sirius," Remus hissed. "Get out. This isn't... I'm just hiding from Filch. Have a heart, Mooney." Sirius whipped back the invisibility cloak, a familiar grin on his face. The sort of grin that usually got him whatever he liked. Remus bristled. "You've got the cloak. Hide somewhere else. I'm nearly finished here anyway. They'll be leaving in a minute." "Well then, it's no big deal, is it? I'll just stay here till they're all gone. Might even learn something." "Remus, are you okay in there?" A tap on the door. Christopher. "Yeah, sorry." Remus gave Sirius one last furious glance before stepping out. Sirius grinned and vanished again. Remus had left the door open, and he knew that Sirius had got bored and left the office. Remus pictured him leaning casually against the wall, observing with a wry smile. Remus carried on teaching as best he could, trying to ignore the distraction. He felt horribly exposed being watched like that, knowing that Sirius was so near. When the class finally finished, Remus ushered them all out, saying that the room was needed for something else. Everyone left, chattering excitedly about the weekend ahead. Everyone except Christopher. "I'll help you clear up," he said, eagerly, as the last few students filtered out, shouting their goodbyes to Remus as they went. Christopher and Remus made short work of rearranging the charms classroom, restoring it to its usual orderliness. He could feel Sirius watching them the whole time, the hair on the back of his neck standing up. "Did you read that book?" Christopher asked. "The Charioteer?" Remus winced but nodded. "Yeah, it was good." It had been good. Hard to read at points, worryingly relatable, but something of a relief too. "Oh, I'm glad you liked it," Christopher said. Remus could imagine Sirius pulling a face at Chris, getting so excited over a book. "What about the ending?" "Oh, yeah, it was good. I liked it." "Really?" Christopher wrinkled his nose. "I didn't. I wish Laurie had picked Andrew. Don't you?" Of course, Christopher identified with Andrew, sweet and bookish and chaste. "I liked Ralph." Remus shrugged. "Even if he wasn't perfect, he was more, I don't know, exciting." Remus had thought Ralph sounded really fucking sexy, actually, but he'd been picturing Sirius the whole time, which might have a lot to do with it. He dearly hoped that if Sirius was eavesdropping, and of course he was Sirius after all, that he didn't understand a word Christopher was saying. "I thought you'd like him best," Christopher said, with a note of sadness. He was standing next to Remus now, his satchel over one shoulder, ready to go. "Just go," Remus begged inwardly. "He reminded me a bit of your friend, Sirius Black." Oh? That got his attention. And Sirius's too. Remus could practically feel him straighten up. Yeah. Christopher smiled coyly. Sorry, but it's pretty obvious you have a bit of a thing for him. Remus just blinked, struck dumb. Christopher laughed softly. It's a waste of time, Remus. Can't you see that? Yeah, he's beautiful and everything, but he's clearly girl mad. You ought to... you deserve someone who cares about you just as much as you care about them. Christopher, I don't... Christopher cut him off with a kiss. He just reached up and kissed Remus, as if it was that easy. Remus's first instinct was to push him away. This was nothing like what he'd wanted. Fortunately, it was only the briefest brush of the lips. Oh, Chris, Remus breathed. You're such a good mate and... Oh shit, he shouldn't have said mate. Mate was the worst possible word. He could practically see Christopher's heart break. But only for a moment, before that pure-blood stiff upper lip took over. He shook his head, stepped back. It's fine, honestly. I'd rather be friends than not, if that's all we can be. Remus ached. Come on. Christopher smiled as if nothing had happened. It's steak and kidney pie tonight, your favourite. They left the classroom, just the two of them, and Remus quietly closed the door behind him to avoid suspicion. Chapter 112, 6th Year, Apparitions. Sirius didn't show up for dinner. Emmeline wandered over and asked James where he was, but James just shrugged. Sorry, he said. We were on a mission earlier. I lost track of him. Hope Filch never caught him. And why would Filch be looking for Sirius? Lily asked, setting her knife down and giving James a very direct look. I'm sure I don't know, James said quickly, staring at his mashed potatoes as if it was the most fascinating thing in the world. 20 minutes later, the prefects were summoned to an emergency meeting to discuss a problem on the 5th floor. All of the suits of armours had apparently begun singing opera. All of the students were ordered to their common rooms for the rest of the evening, and when Peter, Remus, Mary and Marlene reached the tower, they found Sirius there, sitting in front of the fireplace, smoking. Where did he get the fags? Remus wondered. He usually asked me. Sirius Black was not the type to buy his own cigarettes. He was a professional borrower. All right, Black? Mary asked, cheerfully. Yeah, fine, Sirius grunted, still staring at the fire. Weren't hungry? She asked. No, he inhaled and puffed out, like a restless dragon. Ah, Mary raised knowing eyebrows and looked at the others. In one of your moods, I see. He did not respond to this. Remus often forgot how well Mary knew Sirius. He admired the breezy, no-nonsense way she dealt with him. His own instinct was often to coddle and give in. He ought to take a leaf out of Mary's book, he thought. When Christopher returned from the prefects' meeting, Remus stuck to him like glue for as long as possible. Partly because he knew he'd hurt him, and he wanted to show him that nothing had changed. Partly because he knew that Sirius wouldn't come anywhere near them while they were together. They sat on the window seat at the back of the room, furthest from the fireplace. It was the same place Sirius had sat with Remus only a few months ago, where they'd argued, then made up. But he wasn't thinking about it. He was listening to Christopher's rundown of the prefect's briefing. And everyone knows Potter probably had something to do with it, but obviously there's no proof because he's basically a professional vandal and everyone loves him, so he gets away with it. Even Lily Evans has given up. She never takes him to task like she used to. Oh, really? Remus feigned interest, watching the back of Sirius's armchair. Yeah, Christopher nodded. She's gone soft on him. I even asked her what she thought should be done to punish the pranksters, and she actually giggled. She said it was actually quite funny, as it hadn't hurt anyone, and that I should lighten up. I used to really look up to her, you know. Maybe you should lighten up, Remus sighed. Does sound like it was funny. God knows we could all do with a laugh. But prefects are supposed to uphold all of the rules, Christopher replied, an echo of McGonagall in his voice. Not just the boring ones. Anyway, if that's how you feel, I don't know why I bother. He started to get up. Chris, Remus looked up at him. Come on, don't be like that. I'll quiz you on runes if you like. I don't feel like it, Christopher replied snippily. I'm going to bed. He walked off towards the dorms. Remus sighed again and rubbed his eyes. He'd give it a few more minutes and then go up himself. It had been a trying sort of day. But of course, it wasn't over. No sooner had Remus brushed his teeth and changed into his pyjamas than Sirius had taken his opportunity. He was standing in the middle of the dorm room with a face like thunder, arms folded. Remus felt at a bit of a disadvantage in his night things and bare feet, but he tried to remain stoic and nodded. Hey, Sirius. I'm just going to bed. He tried to walk towards his own side of the room, but Sirius blocked him. You really pissed me off, you know that, he said furiously. Excuse me? Remus reeled back, frowning. Sirius carried on, practically ranting. If you were trying to make me jealous, then I think it's really bloody low of you, Remus. Remus rolled his eyes, which he knew would rile Sirius up even more. Oh, of course, he said sarcastically. Everything's about you, isn't it? For God's sake, you weren't even supposed to be there. Why didn't you just leave with the rest of the group? Well, I thought you'd want to go down to dinner together. How was I supposed to know you'd been having secret trysts with that... I haven't been having secret trysts with anyone but you, you idiot, Remus spat. You've already made me regret that. Christopher is my friend, and either way, it's none of your bloody business, so keep your nose out. Fine, Sirius shouted. If that's what you want. I said so, didn't I? Remus was furious, so angry that he knew if he stayed much longer he'd say something he'd regret. They both liked the last word in an argument. It was one of the only ways they were similar. As he had nowhere to go, he pushed past Sirius to his bed and shut the curtains so vigorously that he almost ripped the rings off the frame. In a few moments, he heard Sirius's angry footsteps stomping back down the stairs. Well, Remus thought, if he didn't get the message before, he's got it now. Monday, the 4th of April, 1977. Inconveniently enough, the very first apparition lesson of the year happened to fall on the April full moon. Remus was already intensely nervous, in that shaky, sweaty sort of way, about these lessons. Add to that the challenge he usually had keeping his magic under control in the days preceding the moon, and he was sure it was a recipe for disaster. I might end up on the other side of the country, he said in a low voice to Lily as they queued up outside the Great Hall. You can't, she assured him. I asked Professor McGonagall. They've only lifted anti-apparition measures on the hall, so I don't think you can get outside it. Really? Okay, that's good. He nodded, trying to calm himself. It had been infinitely useful, having Lily aware of the furry little problem. She was much better at common sense than James or Sirius. Anyway, she whispered, you should stop acting like it's a bad thing, being extra strong sometimes. I'd have thought it was an advantage, especially from someone as clever as you. That struck him in a funny way. No one had ever suggested he tried to be positive about his problem before. Well, except for Livia. You don't know half the power you hold, Remus Lupin. Inside the hall, Professor McGonagall introduced the eager 6th and 7th years to the tall, spindly ministry official who was there to teach them apparition. Remus had, of course, done a fair bit of reading on the subject and already knew about the 3Ds, but he had rather hoped that there would be more to it than that. After much too little instruction, in Remus's opinion, the students were given wooden hoops, asked to simply have a go. He caught Mary's eye as they carried their hoops to a free space. She pulled a bug-eyed face and he laughed, which earned a stern look from the instructor. Not wanting to make a bad impression, Remus refocused his attention on the hoop. It was very difficult to concentrate when everyone around you was twirling on the spot, tripping and stumbling like puppies being trained to roll over. Still, Remus closed his eyes and tried. Deliberation. Best not to take it too fast, like flying a broom. Slow and steady wins the race. Determination. He really, really wanted to beat Sirius at this. Destination. The hoop wasn't even that far away. He'd side-alonged further, that time with Mrs. Potter. Remus tried to recall how that had felt. The magic pulling him forward. No, more like following a channel, like water swirling down a bathtub drain. If you pressed your fingers against the hole, you could feel the vacuum sucking. It was a bit like that. Bollocks! A shout went up, causing a lapse in Remus's concentration. He opened his eyes in time to see James and Sirius sitting dazed on the floor, staring at each other in confusion, rubbing their heads. Oh no, Remus thought. Did they do it already? Idiots! Mary laughed. Everyone else was laughing too, and Sirius was looking extremely put out as he climbed to his feet and dusted off his robes with a dignified sniff. What happened? Remus asked. They both jumped at the same time and hit each other, she snorted. Silly buggers. I'm not feeling anything. Are you? Remus shook his head. He closed his eyes again and concentrated as hard as he could, feeling for whatever it was that would pull him in the right direction. He thought he had it, tried twirling, but got nowhere. At least he didn't fall over. Something wasn't right. This was like the stupid Patronus thing all over again. He still hadn't managed that one. He was one of the only ones who hadn't. Even Peter had produced a wispy bit of silver. Only the trick to that was having a happy thought, and Remus accepted that happy thoughts were not his forte. This, however, this required determination. And wasn't he determined? Just then, the ministry-sanctioned apparition instructor wafted past, and Remus caught a whiff of his magic. It was peculiar and strong, buzzing. It reminded him of the way the old TV in the rec room at St. Edmund's gathered a fuzz of static on the screen. As a child, Remus had held his hands up to it in wonder and stroked the bizarre, otherworldly energy as if he could absorb it. There was a snap in Remus's mind, like ice cracking. That was it. Remus relaxed his body. He didn't have to look for the right channel or try to feel it out. He could already feel it. The room was full of magic, thick and iron-like, and hot-cold against his teeth. He could always sense it. He had just learnt to tune it out over the years. That was harder to do on a full moon. But in this scenario, that might not be a disadvantage, as Lily had said. He closed his eyes, breathed in, and moved. It felt like only the slightest twitch, a wand flick, or the quirk of an eyebrow. He let the magic do all the work, and when he opened his eyes with a gasp, he was inside the hoop. Bravo! The instructor was clapping his spindly hands together, delicately, noiselessly. Nice one, Moony! James called across the room, a large egg-shaped bruise glowing on his forehead. Well done, Remus! The girls cheered. Remus looked at his feet, embarrassed, but thrilled. Friday the 15th of April, 1977. By mid-April, there seemed to be no limits to Remus's newfound confidence. He was cautious about it, of course. He didn't tell anybody, perish the thought, in case they might think him arrogant, or even worse, dangerous. But he knew that something had changed. For many years now, Remus had considered his lycanthropy and the uncontrollable feelings and senses which arose from it as a limitation on his magic. If the past few weeks were anything to go by, this had been incorrect. Perhaps this misunderstanding was simply due to the fact that too little study had been done on werewolves in the wizarding world. Or perhaps Livy had been right. Remus had been instructed by the wrong people all along. Now, in private, he carried out various experiments, from simple basic spells to much more complex transfiguration and transmutation. All of them came much easier when he relaxed, when he harnessed whatever magic was already there in the space around him. Before, casting a spell had felt like drawing water up from a well inside him, a heavy bucket on a winch. After the apparition discovery, he felt as though he'd been standing on a lake all along, and all he needed to do was drink. He had even begun to make steps towards wordless magic. In the meantime, he had exams to prepare for, and while his newfound strength would certainly be useful in his practical exams, Remus still had to complete several written papers. On this particular afternoon, he had convinced James, and by extension Peter, to revise along with him. It was a bright spring day, and the last chills of winter had eked out enough that they all agreed that it would be nice to sit outside for a while. They sprawled out on the grass, books open, James reading with his tongue between his teeth and a quill behind his ear, Peter half-heartedly jotting down notes on hinky-punks. "It's not fair," he whinged. "It's not newts or owls this year. Why have we got to do exams at all?" "Wouldn't want to lose your edge, Wormy," James replied, still engrossed in his book. "Think of it as practice for newts." "Oh, I'd rather not." Peter pulled a face. "Moony, do you have the notes for Tuesday, Thursday and Sundays?" Remus said, promptly, not looking up from his defence against the dark arts essay. "What?" Peter scratched his head. "Tuesdays, Thursdays and Sundays," Remus repeated. "Those are the days I hold my study groups, and those are the days that I help other people with their work. I need the rest of the time to catch up on my own stuff." "Oh, but I'm your best friend," Peter moaned. "Please, Moony." "Less time snogging Dorcas, more time organising your notes," Remus smirked. It was very easy to be pious when you weren't allowed to snog the people you wanted to snog. Speaking of which... "All right, lads?" Sirius came sauntering across the lawn towards them, Emmeline trotting along beside him. James looked up and grinned. Peter moved to make a space. "Where have you been?" James asked. "Never seen you these days." "Not my fault you've become one of them, Prefect Potter," Sirius replied coolly. "I had detention." "You're in detention more often than I'm doing anything prefectish," James countered, no longer reading his book, now back in marauder mode. He nodded at Emmeline, who sat primly beside Sirius, smoothing her skirt down. "All right, Em?" "Hi, James." She smiled back at him. "Peter, Remus, are you all revising?" "Unfortunately," Peter groaned. "Moony's not helping me, though." "Oh, help yourself for once," Remus snapped, no longer lightly teasing. "I think it's a good idea," Emmeline said encouragingly. "Get it out of the way before Hogsmeade this weekend. I think it's responsible. Don't you, Sirius?" "Suppose. Speaking of," she continued, ignoring his brush off, "what do you fancy doing in Hogsmeade? Will I meet you there, or will you pick me up outside my common room?" "Ugh, I don't know. Why does it have to be a big deal?" Peter, despite his earlier despair, suddenly became fascinated by his Defence Against the Dark Arts notes, head bowed over the parchment. "Other boys don't mind making plans to take their girlfriends out," Emmeline said, her voice edging on shrill. This was clearly old ground for them. Like Peter, James and Remus began to concentrate on their books and notes as if their life depended on it. Sirius and Emmeline carried on bickering regardless. "Well, I'm not other boys," Sirius growled. "I thought you liked that." "So did I," she shot back. "So what? I'm a terrible boyfriend because I don't want to trail around you like some soppy git." "That's not what I'm asking, and you know it." "Stop complaining, then." I'm not complaining. Sounds like it. Moan, moan, moan. Emmeline opened and closed her mouth a few times, clearly wanting to say something back, but not wanting it to sound like moaning. Finally, she sat in silence, staring at the ground. Her eyes looked a bit brighter than usual, and Remus finally felt himself softening towards her. Poor girl. "Oh, Merlin, don't sulk," Sirius complained at her silence. "If you're angry, then let's have a fight. If you're okay, then give us a snog. But please don't sulk." "Ugh, are those the only two options with you? They are, aren't they, Sirius?" Emmeline snapped, climbing to her feet and folding her arms across her chest. "Yep," he replied, grinning that serious black grin. "Ugh!" She threw her hands up and stormed away, back towards the castle. Once she was gone, there was only the uncomfortable silence left. James cleared his throat. "Not very nice, Pads," he said over his textbook. "She's upset now." "She's always upset," Sirius whined. "What about my feelings?" "I'm not convinced you have any," James said, without missing a beat. "What do you think, Moony?" Remus glanced up from his own book, hoping he looked harassed and uninterested, as if he hadn't been paying rapt attention. "Does Padfoot have feelings?" Sirius caught his eye. Remus straightened his back, looked away. "Definitely not." Sirius stood up, without a word, and left. "Sirius! Oi!" James stood, but Sirius did not look back. James scratched his head, sitting back down uneasily. He was thoughtful for a moment, before looking at Remus. "Moony, is something going on between you two?" Remus glared at him. "Ask him." "I did. He won't say anything." "Really?" Remus was genuinely surprised. He'd been half certain Sirius had told him every filthy detail. He must be really ashamed. "What?" James was looking at him very intensely now. "What's going on?" I slept with Mary." At least it was true. Peter made an odd sort of gasp beside him, but Remus ignored it. "He found out. That's all." "You what?" James' eyebrows shot up in unmasked surprise. He quickly rearranged his features, clearing his throat. "Oh, well, good on you, mate. I had no idea that you and her—" "Just a one-off thing," Remus said quickly. "Okay, right, well, why's Sirius in a mood about it? He and Mary broke up ages ago." "Yeah," Remus replied glumly. He sighed. "Oh, go on then, Pete. Borrow my notes. Which bit are you stuck on?" End of chapter 112.